Okay, good evening all and welcome to this wonderful evening. Since March 24, which is close to 3 months now, we have seen only a COVID churn across. But what comes out of churn as per our previous example is Amrit. And that is what we are going to see that after this COVID churn is going to get over, we are going to have the Amrit for all of us. Today evening, we are going to spend time with hugely admired industry leaders to understand the thoughts which are there in our mind, what will happen to people's skills, reskilling, upskilling, how the roles will change, what we need to do to ensure that we remain relevant in the industry setup. There was also a very typical pharma industry equation, which says that pharma training has to be classroom. So that was the equation. So are we going to see a death of classroom training in pharma and new trends are going to emerge? So we'll have answers to all of these questions through our eminent panel. So I'll first do the lovely and honorable job of introducing all our panels today, whom we are going to spend time with. So allow me to introduce you to the panel. Before we go ahead, I would first like to start with uh, uh, expressing our gratitude to everyone who is directly or indirectly involved in the fight against corona and protecting lives. Whether it is a medical professional, whether it is a paramedic, everyone who is involved into it. So I would like to express our gratitude to them. I would also like to express thanks and gratitude to all our colleagues, bravehearts who have backed in the field for almost every company, overcoming their anxieties, apprehensions, and going to meet their customers who possibly they missed out in the last couple of months. So with that, I'll welcome each one of you to this session on future of learning in pharma sales and marketing, a post-COVID perspective. I'll do the honors for me to introduce our panelists for the evening, Mr. Sudarshan Jain. He has about 35 years of industry experience. He has been a science grad.
You have to share. You have to share your slides. We can't see the slides, Vinay.
No.
No. Share your screen.
Okay. So sorry. Yeah, has disabled participant screen sharing. So
I'm making you host. Just check.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So as I said, I would like to start with expressing my gratitude to everyone who is involved in the fight against corona. Whether it is a doctor, paramedic, everyone, they have been doing enormous work to ensure that we stay safe and protected. I would also like to extend my thanks to all our field colleagues who are braving odds, overcoming their anxieties and apprehensions, and they have started meeting their customers across board, most companies now. So with this, let's move quickly to our session, and I would like to first introduce the panel whom we are going to spend time with. Mr. Sudarshan Jain, he has about 35 years of industry experience. He is a science grad from St. Stephen's College, and I am from Ahmedabad. But what impresses me the most is his strong passion for healthcare and education. While he has held various leadership positions across companies, he has his footprint all over pharma spectrum, whether it is healthcare, OTC, hospital diagnostics, nutrition. There are many commercial accolades to his name. To me, one stands out is 10% of the top 300 brands have been immensely benefited through the golden touch of Mr. Jain. There are many industry leaders who are holding top-notch positions today. Somewhere during their journey, I know that they have blessed through their direct or indirect interactions with Mr. Jain. The most awe-inspiring aspect of Mr. Jain is the enormous work he has done in shaping healthcare policy and improving access to healthcare in India through his various roles as Vice President of OPPI, representing various research-based pharma companies. He is currently member of Indian Institute of Health Management Research in Jaipur, He is board of member on Indian Education Society, and is associated with various teaching institutes. So that is Mr. Jayan for you. Knowing him, true to his heart, he is a core teacher, and every interaction is a learning moment for everyone who interacts with him. We have Sandeep Khandelwal, who has spent over 22 years of general management experience and functional leadership with sectoral experience across healthcare, FMCG, consumer durables, and geographic experience across South Asia. Currently, Sandeep is heading the India business at Dr. Reddy's and has stints before that with Abbott, Marico, and Godrej. Sandeep is an MBA from a premier institute with successful business management backed by strong leadership skills to manage both scale and complexity. He has a strong and diverse background with leadership across sales, marketing, commercial excellence, training, trade, and IT. And there's one particular aspect of Sandeep. Whatever he does, he would love to ensure that he and his team does it with agility and on a scale. So if you want something, it has to be done on a scale so that the impact is felt uh, as per the expectations. Mr. Rajarshi Ganguly is with Alchem Laboratories Limited as President and Global. Overall, he brings with him 26 years of industry experience in the field of human resources function, handling variety of transformational roles both in India and abroad. Prior to Alchem, he was with Dr. Reddy's Laboratories for 13 years, and before that, he had stints with BPCL and Usha Martin. Rajarshi has authored several articles and case analysis, and he is a well-known speaker in different forums. He is certified management trainer and an alumni of Xavier Institute of Social Services, Ranchi. Welcome, sir, to this panel, and wonderful evening with all our participants. And lastly, we have Sundar Ramchandran. He is General Manager, Training India and Lead Capability Workstream Emerging Markets for GSA. My initial memories of Sundar, when I heard his first name, it was in the form of an equation, if I can say that, Sundar, is digital in pharma is equal to Sundar. That was the first equation and first memories I have for Sundar. He is a chartered fellow of CIPD, Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development in UK, has worked in leadership roles in learning across healthcare services, technology over 17 years. He is passionate about digital learning and modern workplace learning practices. He has done enormous work in thinking in his space through his writing and speaking across industry forums globally. Sundar has led both GSK and Pfizer, his previous employer, and has won multiple awards for innovation in learning, including the Salesforce Excellence Awards in 2018 and 2015. So there is a huge opportunity for us to learn through our interactions with all these esteemed panel members. And I do look forward to a great interaction with each one of them. Before I move on to the first question, I would quickly take 2 minutes to introduce Nextplan Consulting. We are a young organization, just started in April, but total about 200 years of experience. And we have good fortune of having a footprint across various Indian and multinational companies. And many of our clients, we are doing recurrent work. So that shows that we are of value to these clients. We are now offering both sales and marketing interventions. Previously, many of them were through physical and classroom based, but most of them we are now able to offer through online instructor-led interventions, whether it is marketing plan in action or advanced tactical planning and many more for the marketing folks, or building sales leadership capabilities, sales by design, FLM first, rep certification, and many more on the sales side. All of these we have the capability to offer on the online platform. We are also looking at if there is an opportunity and there is a need for rejigging the marketing plans, especially in light of the recent developments on various areas, whether it is customer insighting, content, media mix, outcome, and methodology. So that's Nextplan for you. Thank you so much for your time. And once again, apologies for the initial mishap on the slide share. With that, I will close my slide shares and we'll start this wonderful evening with first question to uh, our panel, Mr. Jain. Uh, I'll have the honor of going to Mr. Jain first. So there are many defining events, whether it is the Great Depression or the advent of internet, which have changed the workforce dynamics and the knowledge and skill set levels for the entire workforce. COVID appears to be something similar. So how do you see as a leader that the pharma model will evolve post-COVID in the next couple of years? And what are the talent implications of this changed pharma model for the sales and marketing folks?
Thank you very much, Vinay, and thank you to Nextplan, Sherry, you and the whole team of Nextplan. This is the third panel discussion which we have, and it is a great thought leadership initiative, and it is my pleasure to be part of this. I would also like to thank all the distinguished panel members here, Sandeep, Rajarshi, and Sundar. I have the opportunity to work with them on many of the counts, and also thank all of you who are attending this discussion today. I will say not discussion, I will say it is a conversation, because we'll have more of a conversation, who are making difference on the ground. Every crisis, according to me, is a great opportunity, and it is a transformation moment for the journey going forward, for the society, for the organization, and for the individual. COVID is also the ultimate uncertainty, which I have seen in my life, where every day is a new day, and every day is an exciting day. We have been part of this journey. Sandeep and me practically have been talking every week. Rajarshi have been talking every week on this. When we started around 90 days back, I didn't know what will happen. And the prediction that day was around 5 to 10%. And we had given commitment to the Prime Minister of the country that the medicines will be available. We didn't know where we were heading for. But this kind of crisis, we anticipated that day. We had the discussion of the top leadership of IPA, and we said that there will be 3 types of shocks which are bound to be there in this kind of situation. First is the supply shock, which happens because the whole thing is in disruptions. And this was ultimate thing because people can't go out of the office. So supply shock is bound to be there. There are requirement of social distancing. People will travel. Transportation is not there. People were beaten up, those who were trying to reach to the office. And I happened to be with Shinde. So he says, how do you expect us to reach to the office? So supply shock was the first thing. We worked on it over a period of time. Practically every day we were meeting, working with the government, and great example of coordination between the government, industry, and all of you on the ground who were working to make sure and working together, because I have never seen this kind of coordination between all the association, all the companies to find the answers themselves and with the government. So today we can say from a supply point of view, which was around 8 to 10% 3 months back, today is around 90% in many of the companies. And the objective with supply chain team has set, we were having a seminar with McKinsey 2 days back, is we will get 100% production with the same kind of cost, and maybe in some of the cases 70 to 80% attendance, because you can't have everyone together. Great objective, everyone enthusiastic to make the difference. And the seminar, which we started at 7 o'clock, we continued up till 9:30. So supply shock is one of the things. Second area is demand. You never know how the demand patterns change. We are working on this at this particular moment, and Sandeep has been a great part of it. We are learning every day and trying to find it out. Third is the financial shock. The cost goes up, API prices are increasing, cost of managing operation goes up. Rajarshi is part of it. You have to give hotel accommodation, you have to give transportation. So all those are part of it, but employee safety is at the center of it. And the fourth area which makes these shocks to live with is the people area, because people is fundamental at this particular moment. And I will give you the examples of how the Indian industry has developed in a very short way, because I've been part of this industry for 40 years. In 1975, 77, when I joined this industry from IIM Ahmedabad, was 80% was imports, and the global companies were big things when say DB Gupta used to talk to me that we'll be the largest in the world in ethambutol. One couldn't believe it. And when Dilip Sangvi started talking of mental diseases, Dr. Reddy was talking of research, we couldn't. And Alchem came at that time, 1980s. So all these organizations, we were wondering what will happen in the future. So first inflection point was from a place where 80% were imported. DPCO in 1979 came in, and everyone said that this industry will not survive, price control is there. And then also process patent became the important thing, only product patents were applicable. So this was taken as an opportunity by Indian entrepreneurs. And Indian entrepreneurs spent on manufacturing facilities, spent on reverse engineering, and the skill which was important, first was science, only science, import, but no one thought of scale at that particular moment. 1980s to 2005, I will say, was the time of reverse engineering, first to market the product. Every company will try to get the product first, Torrent, Sun, Lupin, and the Indian and Dr. Reddy's and Alchem, they build large scales. As far as they build scale, the point which you were talking about, Sandeep, when he talks of scale is important. And the companies invested a hell of a lot on research, reverse engineering, first to launch the product. And that was the area, that was the Pharma 2.0. And that time also 1990s, there was Hatch-Waxman Act which came in, which allow branded generic companies, if they are first to launch the product, they can build scale in US market. So time of globalization came in. And some of the great things which happened, Cipla, they started talking of affordable healthcare and HIV drugs, which used to cost $1,600. They said we will come with $1 a day cost. So $1,600 cost a year. They said we will come at $300 cost. And that started changing the concept of affordable healthcare. Reach became important. So 2005, so 1980 to 2005, I will call the period of reverse engineering, building scale. 2005 to 2020 was the time of globalization, and Indian companies went full hog. And today we have got products available. All of us can be proud of the fact that our products are available in 205 countries. Every third tablet in US is sold from India. Every fourth tablet in UK is sold from India. And also, again, the concept of large field force in India came in. I could never imagine in 2006, 2007, in Abbott, we used to have 400 people. And if I have to add 10 people, Sherry is part of it, we'll go through tremendous discussion. And at the end of 1 year, if we are able to get 5 additions, Vinay has been part of that debate, we will get very excited. 1 person added in the training team. Those kind of debates used to happen in. So, but Indian companies, Sun, Dr. Reddy's, Alchem, they came with the concept of large field force. And there was another group of companies like, say, GSK, Sanofi, Abbott. They were focused scientific marketing, research products. So there was a combination of both things which was going on. So 2005 to 2020 was the period of push, large field force, push structures. Doctors have to be met three times a day. Glaxo has started changing that model in last 8 to 4 years. But it was the time of push sales. It was the time of large structures. It was the time of selling skills. It was the time of globalization. So that is the Pharma 3.0. Now, 2020, we entered the phase of Pharma 4.0. I will call it as Y2K product moment for the Indian pharma industry. As far as IT industry was concerned, 2000 was that moment. 2020 is the Y2K moment as far as Indian industry is concerned. And what will be important at this moment is, yes, globalization will continue to be a big thing in terms of manufacturing, because I'm talking in an integrated way. Quality, corporate governance will become a high kind of thing. But there will be fundamental changes which will be taking in marketing. And to quote Sherry's word, which he keeps on saying, permission marketing will become very, very important. It will be focused on segmentation. It will be focused on targeting. It will be focused on messaging. It will be not like today what we are doing. Sorry to say it, you keep on having webinars without having the objective, clear objective. It will not be having calls every time, calling the doctor, WhatsApp messages. So there will be a moment of permission marketing. There will be focus on segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And I will say it will be the days of targeting marketing. It will be a moment also of empowered organization. Rajarshi will talk about it. It will be time for an accountable organization. So I will stop here, and then I will say that it is targeting marketing time, it is permission marketing time, and it is time for empowered organization. Thanks so much for this time.
So thank you, sir. So guys, we are already into Pharma 4.0, a Y2K moment, as Mr. Jain said, for the pharma industry. And a very clear message that we are moving on to permission marketing, which means a very strong customer orientation is something is going to be the need of the hour. Instead of 10 calls, 5 KMS, 2 distributors, and maybe that sort of a work pattern. So with this background, Sandeep, I'll come to you. So from a customer management perspective, and if it has to be a very effective customer management, what mindset and skill set changes? Because it's not just skills which are required, but even mindset needs to change, especially in the sales teams you envisage would be required in the post-COVID situation.
Very interesting question, Vinayak. And I just take inspiration from what Mr. Jain spoke about. I think all of us are at a cusp right now, right? I mean, the fact that all of us have been locked in our homes for the last 70 to 90 days, depending on which part of the country you guys are representing. Social behaviors have changed. I don't think how many of you are actually getting physical newspapers on your thing. I'm sure most of it is moved on the mobile. We are extremely comfortable on this webinar. I'm sure there are times when some of these things were alien to us. I think the adoption of digital has really moved forward. And I'm talking more from a consumer perspective right now. I think physical interactions are going to get far more rarer. I don't think how many people are going to be comfortable shaking hands or hugging each other. So I think overall, what this will do is this 2 months, 3 months period that we guys are locked up in our homes will definitely have some kind of an impact on us. And at least the way I see it, the doctors are also human beings. They're also consumers at the end of it. If I were to come back, and when Mr. Jain was talking about the various phases of the pharma industry, if you look at it, a lot of the innovation was actually back-ended driven. The front-ended innovation was very similar. If I were to broadly look at it, the way we were selling 30 years back is exactly the way we are selling now. I know some organizations have moved from physical VAs to iPads, but even those iPads have largely been, conversion of digital movement of the VAs. If I were to look at, how the industry was, cycle meets was a critical part. The whole meet and greet and hand on the shoulder was an extremely important part of the team. And now we are in a world where I'm sure none of the companies actually had a physical interaction for the last 4-5 months. Everybody did the cycle meets in a very virtual manner. I'm just in the midst of an integration of the Vocart portfolio where we are onboarding 2,000 people virtually. And these were things which are unthinkable. So if I were to look at it from a change perspective, and specifically the question when he spoke about of what is the change and what as salespeople are things that we need to upgrade, what are the capabilities that we really need to bring in. I'll put it into multiple buckets. I think the first bucket I like to talk about is upskilling. If I were to talk about my experience in the last 1.5 months since the lockdown and eased up and we are in the unlock phase, we're realizing that, medical reps are slowly started entering the markets. The concept of green and orange, we see most of the companies are today working there. But the call averages are still at an average of 5 to 6. And what we're realizing is it's far more difficult accessing the doctor than what it used to be in the past. The doctor is saying, I'm okay meeting you, but tell me if there's anything meaningful that you have to talk. I'm no longer okay with the courtesy call, right? If there's a courtesy call, please give me a call or put an SMS to me. And I think what it is forcing us to do is figure out what is the meaningful conversation that we can have, right? So in my mind, the most important part is going to be how do we upskill ourselves? How do we ensure that each conversation means something, whether it be a physical conversation or a virtual conversation that we move into? I think the world of just putting samples in front of the doctors and hoping that he's going to remember my brand is going to be over. Even if I were to look at our experiences, right? I mean, initially there was, I'm sure most of the companies moved into this whole virtual CME concept. What we realized was if there is meaningful content, then the doctor is comfortable sticking around. If it is just a matter of relationship, they're saying, okay, I like you, but I don't want to log in. So I think the other big piece that I'm seeing is a lot of company now moving to multi-channel marketing. I mean, this thing was available to us even 3, 4, 5 years ahead. I see some of the companies like GSK and a couple of others who have actually adopted this slightly earlier. But most of the companies have now realized the benefit of it, right? The fact that there is a physical call and there's going to be something which is going to be pre-call and post-call. So I think one big capability which our medical rep, our sales team will have to figure out is how do we get more planned, how do we get more systematic, how do we ensure that at least in our first line managers, second line managers, we have certain basic understanding of analytics that we throw in, right? I mean, they will just have to be comfortable with data far more than what they used to be. If I were to look at the second bucket that I want to talk about is, I think, know your customer. Slowly what we are realizing is, you know, and I'll tell you about Dr. Reddy. We thought we were digitally slightly more evolved, but at least when we started moving on this thing and started pressing the pedal, we realized that there is still a percentage of the data KYC, which is either their mobile phone, their emails, which are still not clean. And that's something that we really need to work upon. And if we really want to accelerate on the multi-channel marketing journey, then we're realizing this is base stuff. In the earlier world, it was quite okay with the doctor, with the MR and the first line manager knowing the doctor. Now we're realizing that capability has to move to head office. Finally, it's no longer good enough for the medical representative to understand the doctor in his head. We're used to this world of, you know, this segmentation where we used to call a doctor, this is a commercially minded doctor, or he's a knowledge seeking doctor. But I think now the ability of segmentation, because of the digital data set that we have, is far more evolved. I think the third part that we want to look at is, I think, eye on competition. You know, I mean, the fact is markets are really, really moving. I think April, May was quite bad. June looks to be slightly better. But I think all our forecasting tools, all our estimate tools, all our target setting tools are really are no longer relevant. And what we are realizing is that most of the pharma companies have always been very internal driven, right? We used to give a target at the beginning of the year, and finally the whole world used to rotate around, are we on plan, are we not on plan? I think we will also have to be now far more aware about what our competition is doing. I think what we'll realize this year is target setting will go bad. And I think the only true metrics is going to be, are you gaining share compared to your competition? Are you winning market share? So I think, how do we get a little more agile? How do you ensure that, you know, as markets are opening up, which doctors are practicing? Is your performance a function of internal parameters, or is completely externally driven? Is it all forward, or is it also performance gap that you're seeing in your teams? I think that flexibility and understanding is something that we'll have to bring in. If I were to talk about a couple of other pieces, I think resilience, flexibility. I think if you look at most of the sales guys, I think one true benchmark that we typically look at ourselves is, are we on plan? Right? And at a certain level, if you're more than 100%, you feel good about yourself. If you're at 85, 90, you feel bad about yourself. And I think that the resilience, this is going to be a tough year for the industry. I think some of the target setting is going to go wrong. Some of the therapies are going to go too far worse than what we initially envisaged. And how do you keep the chin up? How do you ensure that you don't get too caught up in the past, in the last month's performance? And how do you ensure that you look at ways of solving a problem? There's going to be immense amount of problems which are going to come and hit us. So I think an important piece is going to be, how do we be a little more flexible? How do we be a little more agile? I think my personal feeling is this whole concept of annual targets or 6 monthly targets and annual resourcing is over. We have to be extremely flexible. We have to keep on moving our resources around every 3 months. If the brand is not delivering, if the therapy is not really looking up, then we really need to move our resources around. And I think the other piece that I want to talk about is, you know, adoption to some of the new channels. At a certain level, pharma has never been very open, right? I mean, if I were to talk about e-pharmacies, that would typically contribute 2 to 3%, and in most of the town halls that you do, or most of your interactions, there will be this whole conversation, you know, that I am getting the prescription, but I'm not getting the credit. So I think getting out of this whole pool concept and adopting to some of these channel plays, how do you ensure that you're far more comfortable in a more matrix structure? How are you more comfortable interacting with your institution team, more comfortable with your e-com teams? I think it's going to be an extremely important component that the sales leadership will have to bring in. And I think last point, I know Mr. Jain spoke about it, but I think this whole balancing of employee safety and business continuity. The fact is, markets are going to open up and close down. As we see, you know, there are markets which are doing well, and then there is the spurt of cases. At some point of time, there will be people in your team who will actually get impacted and affected with COVID. And how do you ensure that you keep on balancing that? Keep an eye for employee, keep an eye in terms of, are you giving a safe environment for your team? But also ensure that you also keep an eye that, you know, finally the engine also has to keep on running. So in my mind, these are going to be important questions that I think the industry and the sales team in particular will have to adopt to. But I think exciting times.
Yeah, definitely exciting, Sandeep. And more the tougher scenarios, I think more excitement it brings, provided you are ready to accept that as an excitement and look at things. A couple of quick themes before I move on to Rajarshi, which stuck in mind, is the whole business approach which was there previously, the annual budgeting and review of performance and all. I think that's likely to shift to a more agile budgeting and sales management process. It could be maybe a change happening every 3 months based on quarterly performance, and therefore both the sales organization as well as the marketing organization will have to reorient uh, to be agile and be ready to meet the expectations. The whole play will be, revolve around individual customers. Upskilling is something which is important. So while there will be efforts from the HR, L&D training team, what I gather from your thoughts is for the individual also to look at what are the upskilling areas based on the changing perspectives in the market, and therefore be ready and volunteer for those upskilling requirements.
Absolutely, Vinayak. I think some of the capability that will be pushed to is something that we can't even predict now. And I think a large part of the ownership cannot be only the organization. Finally, the individual will also have to solve for, and how does he get ready for, I think, the new norm. I think some of these things are going to be, I don't think anybody can predict.
Absolutely. So I'll take a clue from your last statement where you mentioned that employee safety and business continuity, both are important. And with this, I will I would love to go to Rajarshi because it's all related to people. And from a human resources management perspective, Ganguly sir, what are the HR challenges emerging out of this crisis? And what specific skills will be required by leadership and HR function to manage workforce in future, and especially the salesman, marketing guys?
Great. Many thanks. And thanks for inviting in this webinar. I heard excellent viewpoint from Sudarshanji and Sandeep. So I think they have covered, most of the even HR challenges in different way. But the way I see things, see, if you look at HR challenges, and it's not specifically for pharma or sales and marketing, but at a broad level, I would put in 3 buckets. The first is, as you rightly said, when a crisis or a pandemic of this nature happens, the first challenge is, the safety. I mean, it's in everybody's mind, there is the safety of the employee, the safety of the family, and it's more so in a business like us, where you are dealing with the medical fraternity, you are dealing with going to hospitals, you're going to clinic. So safety comes first. So the first challenge, even if I look back the last 90 days, I mean, almost on an every day, every week basis, we are addressing questions around safety. That's fundamental, because if we are not safe, the business doesn't happen. The second I would put it, would be on the area of support and security, because coming out of safety, when I'm safe, then when a crisis happens of this nature, and in our lifetime, we have, never seen a crisis of this kind. The first question in people's mind which comes, and at least we are a better off industry where, we are still having business, sales is relatively good. There are industries, as you know, where, they are struggling. They don't have a sale, 0 sales. They're having no sales in the last few months. So how do you kind of, build support and security in the minds of people? So it's emotional security. How do you connect with people? How do you take care of their concerns, anxiety? So I think that HR challenges I'm seeing, and these challenges come directly to HR or, of course, through the people managers. And it's something that we have to face and we have to address. We cannot shy away from it. The third area where I see, the HR challenges come, and this is where we partner with business, is the sustainability of the organization. When you deal with this crisis, and I also believe that, every crisis brings an opportunity, but as you work through the crisis, how do you build a more stronger organization? And that's where the HR partnership is very important. And when I say sustainability, this is where, the HR has to shift its gear from just an administrative mindset to work with the business heads, function heads in addressing areas like, for example, organization structure. Now, already in the last 3 months, there are new things emerging. So how quickly you adapt the organization to think differently, there was a certain way we operated many years. Is there a different way we need to operate? So there are questions around organization design and structure, placement of talent, rationalization, optimization, because cost is important. Every penny counts in this kind of crisis. So how do you build an organization where every person is effective and productive? The third is, I think, in a crisis of this nature, I see that how HR helps the organization in improving innovation and creativity, because you need creative people to sustain and make you stronger in a crisis. Creative business solutions, for example, the traditional way, for example, in our industry, we have been dealing with our stakeholders like the doctors or the hospital. And we see that changing, and Sandeep already mentioned that, they are not so much interested in a routine call. So how do you shift the gear? So how do you be creative? And this is a challenge every leader and every employee has to go through. So how do you enable that? The other challenge in the whole sustainability gamut, which I see, is emergence of new roles, new capabilities, and how do you constantly partner, coach, and guide the business in understanding what are the new roles which will emerge, not only right now, maybe in the future also. And that's something which is already happening, and I myself going through that. The last few important things, of course, the HR challenges are the engagement, because the earlier good old days, you could see everybody, you could meet everybody, there was a different way you could engage, connect. We are not able to do that now. So while one part of the organization, of course, the manufacturing, distribution, their people are coming to work, there's also a set of organization, like even in field force, everybody is not able to meet. Like in the traditional pharma world, every month or every quarter, people used to meet, have cycle meets. That's not happening. So you are virtually locked in your home or in your city, you're connecting over videos. Initially, there are a lot of excitements in the first few months, but those excitements fade away as you move forward. So how do you have different ways of engaging and connecting with your team? And lastly, of course, as you navigate through a crisis, how do you build an organization which is more accountable and agile? Because probably we dealt with these questions even in the past, but it becomes more important that, every resource, how are you deploying? How are you making sure that decision making is fast? Because today, in fact, in the last few months, every day we are, deciding. Probably sometimes back we had the flexibility to take time to decide, but today it's a decision has to be taken on every hour basis. So how quickly you enable this down the line? So these to my mind are the broad HR challenges. Now coming to your add-on question on leadership challenges and HR function challenges, and I think these are no different. Personally, I feel when leaders have to manage a large group of people, whether it's the first line manager or the subsequent level, in a crisis, I think there are a few skills which are absolutely important for any leader. I think the number one is the ability to connect and communicate. In a crisis, when you are not with your forces, so how do you communicate with clarity? I think this is absolutely important, because there is an anxiety in everybody's mind on everyday basis. So how do you communicate on a regular basis? Be transparent. Accept what's working well, share what's not working well. So communication, I think, is absolutely important in this crisis. The second is, conveying the clarity of purpose. Because crisis, everybody guesses, even we, at our level also, we are always uncertain of what's going to happen, let's say next month or, 6 months from now. So are you able to communicate the clarity of purpose? And be honest about it. So because if we are not sure also to communicate with clarity, that there is uncertainty is also good. The third, I think the role that the leadership has to play, and this is more at a business head level that I see, and I keep talking to my business head, that in the times of crisis, how do you collaborate? While competition is at one side, but I would put it a collaborative competition, because it's not that I win, you lose. I mean, we win together. I mean, this is a classic example even Sudarshan ji shared, and this is how we, as an industry, we came together, we navigated so many difficulties. So it's all about, collaborative competition is, I think, a leadership will have to play this role. And then lastly is, as a leader, how are you demonstrating yourself to be a calm leader and a caring leader? Because if your masses don't see you as a leader who is calm and caring, obviously they will have their own anxieties. So to me, these are the important traits of a leader in a crisis that I would advocate. And coming to HR function, I think the HR function will have to enable many of these things to happen. They will have to rediscover themselves. Some of the classical ways they have been taught or managed will not work in a crisis. Policies which were sacrosanct even a few months back has to be revisited. For example, work from home was something not, very common even 5 months back. But how do you revisit some of these policies and embrace newness? Because you have to make sure that policies, processes, systems are designed to be contextual. You cannot operate with policies and practices of past to win in the future. I think these are some of the areas where I see, the HR function will have to reorient, be more flexible, unlearn, learn. These are my overall takeaways from the current situation.
Thank you, sir. Just to quickly summarize, for an HR perspective, I think if I can take the correlation for a leader, whether it is a first line, second line, he is managing a team and therefore he is an extension of HR. Also on the other side, the marketing leads, they are also extension of HR because they are managing people and they are managing teams. So a couple of things which I could pick up is in the current context, especially for a leader, from an HR perspective, it is important that how do you manage anxieties and the nerves and ensure that there is emotional stability from a people management perspective. You also talked about accountability and being agile. So it's a new situation, new moment, and therefore we have to respond with that. And finally, you beautifully summarize in 4 C's. Your first C was connect and communicate, constant communication and honest and transparent communication. You also talked about clarity of purpose when you are communicating with people. That's the second C you talked about. The third C you mentioned was about collaboration and being calm and caring is the fourth C you mentioned about. So with this, I will now move to Sundar. With all these thoughts tabled by Jain sir, Sandeep and Ganguly sir, how do you see the learning landscape from a sales and marketing capability perspective in the post-COVID scenario? You have been associated with various Indian as well as international forums. You have access to what happens globally, and you are well connected in India. So from that perspective, your thoughts on the learning landscape, how do you see that?
Hey, thanks, Vinayak, and great to be here. I think, if you think about the learning landscape, I mean, at the end of the day, it has to respond to the commercial landscape, right? I mean, and that's been spoken about already quite a lot by both Mr. Jain as well as Sandeep. So if you just look at what's happening on the commercial landscape, I mean, it's been changing now for the last few years, but I think the current environment has obviously accelerated it. So if you think about, the whole narrative that's going around the hybrid rep, the digital rep, so on and so forth. I don't want to go too much into that, but building that digital rep will take certain new capabilities, right? Both in terms of the reskilling the reps that we already have, but also reskilling the learning and commercial excellence teams that are sort of have the mandate to do this, right? So I think clearly one of the demands that all of this new commercial evolution of the landscape is placing is how we think about our own internal learning teams, skills and areas that we prioritize in terms of what we want to build out over the near to midterm. And I think clearly those are the ability to really weave in, all the touch points today with which we reach our customers and have a meaningful, engaging conversation. And we all know this. I mean, it's easier said than done. the ability to really have this 360 conversation is not intuitive. It's not even something that we necessarily have solved for, have built for, right? So suddenly, just because we're activating channels, we cannot expect our reps to start behaving differently. And this is a behavior that's been built over years and decades. So I think that's, at a very fundamental level, you've got to rethink the way we scale our people. I think that's one, the entire change of commercial landscape and what's our response to that. So that's on the demand side. If I look at, as a commercial excellence or a commercial learning function. On the supply side, I think every large organization, small organization has to revisit who are the people who are running these functions, who's mandated with this task of building out capabilities. And I think we got to call out, we got to straight talk here, right? I mean, you typically look at our industry, you build a career in sales and marketing, you do a few first, second level managerial roles, and then, that becomes a natural transition into a commercial excellence, commercial capability role, which is great. But I think, this is a profession in itself. So I think you've got to have a serious thinking about what are the learning capabilities required within the L&D function, within the commercial excellence, commercial capability function, whatever you choose to call it, right? Because think of the regular way we work. We do a program which is typically face-to-face, and everyone, and we'll talk about blended learning, digital learning, but what exactly is digital learning? It's a bolt on top of your face-to-face to show that you have some reinforcement and sustainability. You've got to rethink all that, right? Now, if you've got to think an entire learning journey on digital, end-to-end, which means diagnosis, design, delivery, evaluation, commercial enablement, ROI, if everything is going to happen digitally, that requires a complete revisit. It requires a complete recalibration of skill sets. So if you look at what's happening globally, many large organizations, including ourselves, already have people in roles such as learning experience designers. It's been recognized as a skill, and therefore there are roles carved around. So, even if you don't have a role, and you skill people, like I don't have this role in India, but we've been trying to be very thoughtful and deliberate about how can we scale learning teams on designing learning experience, and that's not intuitive. Learning community managers, if learning is going to be social, if it's going to be virtual, if it's going to be on forums such as this, followed by conversations, you've got to have people who understand how to stir a community. The classic example I give is, you put something out on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. How long does it take for you to get a response, a like, a response, a comment, or what have you, right? Usually a few seconds or a few minutes. Now, use that as a proxy and replicate that on your internal social platforms. I know many organizations have some sort of an enterprise social network. And you can post something sometimes on your internal enterprise social network, and it could be days before somebody engages, right? Therein lies the answer. So you need people who understand how to stir conversations around teams, because that's going to be the new way you build capabilities and skills. So I think you've got to look at new roles. So whether it's experience design, whether it's community management, whether it's business partnership, learning business partners. So whether you have those formally or not, that's not such a big deal. But are you being thoughtful about building out these capabilities in your internal teams, right? Which is sort of really will help you build out and solve for the problems that we have now and going forward. The third thing I would say is infrastructure and ecosystem. At the end of the day, if you have to create really consumer class experiences, you do need an ecosystem. You need an environment to do that. I think for a long period of time, we've been a little lazy because, many large companies like us, we've institutionalized the hardware ecosystem. We've given everybody iPads or some sort of a device, and we think that's good. But realistically, if you speak to most business leaders, I'm sure Mr. Jay and Sandeep, Mr. Ganguly could also vouch for this, right? I mean, it's all becoming glass on paper at the end of the day, right? The device doesn't do much. And in the environment we live in today, I mean, why do you want to institutionalize a device? I mean, does it really matter what device? It can be agnostic of device. So how do you create learning? How do you create enablement that's agnostic of device, that's agnostic of any sort of an enterprise limitation? And therefore, this is a great time to build your ecosystem. Look at investments that you have made in your learning ecosystem, your learning technology. And if I just look at from a financial point of view, I mean, I look at my own budget. I mean, what is the percentage of spend? I mean, my budget, typically any learning head's budget is fundamentally driven by logistics in a normal year in pharma. The number of cycle meetings I'm going to do, the number of training programs I'm going to do, 2 days multiplied by people stays, Now all that's gone for the next 1 year. So now I've got to rethink, hey, how am I going to allocate all that capital that I had? So two things, right? Either the business just takes away that and saying, hey, your budget just goes goes down by 80%.
That's what I was thinking, Sundar. They haven't taken it back from you.
There you go. But is there a way you can meaningfully hold on to that and actually rechannel some of that investment into building out for the mid to long term? I think those are all conversations that we need to have, right? And I think what it's going to take, and you know, I've been very vocal about it in the past as well. You got to think of commercial learning as a profession, right? That hasn't happened. I mean, you know, you think about this way, right? We're always trying to prove that we are a business partner. You'd look at the HR learning commentary. It's all about us having a seat at the table. Finance, I've rarely heard my finance colleagues being worried about not having a seat on the table. I've rarely heard my supply chain losing sleep over having a seat on the table. So it's like sometimes I think there's a lack of self-belief in us. We're trying to get something that we believe we don't have. That needs to change. And one way that it can meaningfully change, if you look at learning as a profession, which means anyone who comes into it or anyone who's in it understands the science and thinking behind it. And there is science and structure behind how you do diagnosis. There is science and structure behind how do you design, how do you deliver meaningful experience. It isn't just you bring your body of knowledge from the past and then you're an expert and you talk. It's not like that. So when you study the profession, it gives you conversational confidence, it gives you respect with your business, and you're able to actually meaningfully move forward. So in summary, I'll say, you know, from a capability point of view, commercial landscape is changing. You got to align to that very clearly. So think about what it takes to build out a hybrid rep and therefore the capabilities required to get there. Number two, take a stock, take an inventory of your own internal teams. Do you have the capabilities to do this build out? And if not, build by whatever may be the right thing to do. And number three, look at your ecosystem and infrastructure. Maybe now is a good time to prioritize investments that you may have wanted to make. You know, and these may not be additional capital expenditures. This could just be rechanneling of funds that you already have. Have those conversations with your business leaders. See if you have the toolkit, the ecosystem, because this is not going away. I know the topic of the webinar is post-COVID. I mean, we're in COVID. We're going to be in COVID, I don't know, for the next 8-12 months. So do you have the ammunition to keep you going for the next 1, 2, 3, whatever number of years it may take? I think those are things that I'll place in the consideration set for anyone who's sort of leading learning or sales marketing within our business. Vinayak.
Thank you. So critical for me to understand is a clear alignment necessity of learning landscape with the commercial one. And one single point, if I can bet my money, is on to ensure that the learning function looked upon, seen, built, developed as an essential commercial function, as a profession. So if I can say that, from a good to have to a must have function sort of thing. So we have this pool, and once we have the pool completed, I'll go to the next question with Mr. Jain. So we have 2 questions there, and I would request the participants to quickly share their thoughts. Siri, while people are taking pool, should I move ahead or how it is?
I think you can move ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Jain, you talked about Pharma 4.0 and you also talked about transition from Pharma 1 to Pharma 4. Now, in continuation of that thought, can you share how do you see the role remodeling, if I can use that word, for the sales and marketing professionals, and how the new roles will look like according to you? So your audio is mute.
Thank you very much, Vinay, and it has been so insightful for me what I've been hearing from Sandeep, Rajoshi, and Sundar. I will build on some of the thoughts. I will just take back myself to the day-to-day functioning, although I do a different role. But if I look at the role of the marketing organization, it has been push-driven highly. You formulate a visual aid, everyone communicates the same message. You didn't train our people for individualized marketing. You do the follow-up of sales last 3 days of the organization. everyone is following up the sales. You have organizations which are built that you have to meet your customers every week, twice in a week. So it is pull-driven structures, push-driven structures. You have got a span of control 4, 5, 6, which perhaps will be meaningless, and hierarchies, long hierarchies, which will be thing of the past going forward. You have got 10 calls, outcome-driven, input-driven structures, 10 calls, 4 chemist calls. So all will perhaps fundamentally change going forward. And the point which Sundar was saying, we have to change, and learning is a profession, although it is said that learning agility should be there, but it is so difficult. And the 3 skills, reskilling, upskilling, and cross-skilling will become so important going forward, even at the rep level, that he doesn't have to go and meet the doctor. He has to understand finance to an extent. He has to understand digital to an extent. The point which Sandeep was talking, if he has to play 360-degree role, so he has to play the role of an accounts manager or relationship manager in a bank, where he knows completely about the customer, so he can direct the message. So understanding the insight, understanding the customer will be fundamental. There's using digital technology to supplement his personal selling effort. I don't think there's a substitute to personal selling effort, but what are the digital options which you will use to dovetail the messages? And then last part, he has to be highly outcome driven. So how do we measure the outcome and ensure that business happens in an uncertain environment? Some of the skills, so at psychological, at skill level, understanding of digital, understanding of science, understanding of customers, fundamental. And at a psychological level, which is very, very important, high degree of resilience, operating in uncertainty and making things happen. And we have to identify the individuals, and people who will grow up in the organization will be demonstrating that resilience, uncertain environment, and making things happen. That will become very, very important. And this crisis gave understanding of different type of leaders who made things happen. I will stop here and go to others.
So you mentioned a very important point of a rep being an account manager. That's a huge transition you're talking about. And if I draw parallels to some of the FMCG examples from an account management perspective, the fundamental there becomes the knowledge about your customers, understanding them in its entirety, and then how do you strategize for every single customer in an individualistic manner. So Sandeep, taking that clue to the marketing ones, if that is what is likely to evolve from a role for a sales organization, and a lot of collaboration between sales and marketing is required, and a lot of this would be driven from the marketing side. Sales would be more towards the execution and implementation part. So in light of this background, how do you see the marketing organization? What could be the new skill sets, upskilling, reskilling requirements for the marketing teams in the industry?
No, I think a great question, Vinay. So let me just put it this way, right? And I have the luxury of entering slightly late in the pharma industry, so I still consider myself as a quasi outsider at a certain level. But let's see, how typically as consumers we look at advertisement. Right? There's a Katrina or a Deepika who would come and say, using Dove makes you look better. And the messaging is fairly consistent. It doesn't matter whether you watch it on a Z or a Star or whatever. I mean, the messaging is very consistent. You hopefully believe it and then start using it. In our case, I think the huge difference is that the channel is a function of the number of med reps that we have in the market, right? So irrespective of whatever content preparation that our marketers are doing in head office, finally the delivery is a function of how good or bad the med rep is trained. I think the other piece which is extremely important is, I think this is a very unique industry where if you look at, if you go and buy a washing machine, the guy who's selling it in your neighborhood store would know more about the washing machine than you can ever think about knowing. In our case, we are selling it to an expert. So it's a very unique proposition where the person who is selling it knows less about the product than who he's selling it to, which is the doctor in this case. So a lot of times what we see is marketers are solving either the doctor engagement piece or, conversation that you typically keep on having is, I need to keep on giving these samples or bad brand reminders because this is what our frontline wants it and this is what he expects. So at a certain level, there's a huge sales management angle to the to the role that a marketer does. If I can actually make a slightly provocative statement, and maybe it will not really please a lot of our sales colleagues who are there right now on the call, but traditionally our industry has been a very sales-driven industry. How do we manage the customer? How do we appease the med-rep is an important conversation. I think for the first time we are at the cusp where I think the power will shift from the sales to the marketing team. I think slowly, very clearly, the quality of content that you generate is going to be the decider as far as the conversation with the doctor is concerned. So clearly content is going to be king. Doctor is going to be looking for meaningful interaction. From pharma industry, he's no longer looking at appeasement. And I think that's going to be the huge challenge for especially branded generics marketers. Of how do we ensure that we have conversations around the brand and no longer get back to conversations around the molecule. So how do we ensure that either scientific or emotive conversation that we are able to do with the brand so that the doctor connects with the brand? I think that's going to be a huge important part. Adoption to multi-channel marketing approach. Till now, the only way that you would largely converse with the doctor is either through the medical representative or maybe some levels in CMEs or ad booth that you will typically do. I think what the marketers clearly now are realizing is there are multiple other channels which are opening up. People are connecting to telephones, they're connecting to social platforms that the doctor is today moving around, they're connecting to WhatsApp. I think as a marketer, you will have to slowly learn to how to balance this whole physical and digital world. If you can put a term like physi-digital kind of a world that they'll have to be equipped in doing. I think the other piece is going to be building inciting capability across. Largely, we have always been dependent on, I think, the generic market research firms that we have always dealt with. I think what the world will start looking at is far more real world evidence. Can we look at EMR companies? Can we look at e-pharmacies? Can we look at social platforms? Can we look at teleconsultation, which give us qualitative data which can actually mean meaningful for the brand? I think somebody spoke about the fact, develop segmentation of doctors, look at how do we target the doctors better? How do we actually have a N is equal to 1 conversation with the doctor? And from a capability perspective, an important part that all marketers and business leaders will have to pick up is I understand digital and analytics, which are going to be beyond the webinars, beyond the platform. Data in the digital world means something very different. And how do we use it to close the loop? How do you marry the physical and digital world? How do you amplify the physical call? Somebody asked, I was reading through the question, somebody asked that, how do you see the world is going to be in the whole V2, V3 kind of a world that we have? Important conversation is when you are able to get a physical call, how do you use virtual and digital to either pre or post amplify the call? I think those are going to be important conversations which the marketer will slowly need to look at. Other piece that I want to spoke about is I think rethink resources. Clearly, past promos and past promo percentages do not mean anything at all. Important part is, at least if I were to look at this year, is conserve resources. Look at to do what is essential and not what is good to do. I think the choice making of marketers will have to be very, very clear, and it will not be driven from what's happened in the past. And I think the last point, which is going to be important for all marketers, is embrace the unknown. Take some big bets. Look at digital. Look at the ecosystem of tech players. Look at the ecosystem of bill service model. One question that you typically keep on facing every time when we talk about digital is, what is the ROI of digital? How do I measure it? To be real, we still don't know what is the ROI of the CME that I do with the doctor. Going a little more aggressive, taking some of these big bets are going to be extremely differentiators in my mind for this year as well as next year. My big question to marketers is today in the COVID world, everybody has jumped onto the digital bandwagon. The important part is how many of them will let this stick, and in the physical world, how do you complement the physical world with some of these tools? So that's my take around this one.
So take a clue from your last statement that everybody has taken the plunge or a big jump onto the digital bandwagon. During the course of your deliberation, you also mentioned about a physical touch and a virtual touch, and how as a marketeer, you can augment the efforts of the field force. And maybe the traditional meaning related to a pre-call and a post-call would change significantly. From a digital perspective. You also talked about rejigging the entire resources. So how do we actually relook and respond from a perspective of agility? And while there are multiple things being done in the brand plans, what will stay, what could be the long term is something it's equally important if I understand you correctly. So moving ahead, this appears as a huge change management perspective. The whole game plan or the battlefield or the way we have been approaching business is likely to transform. So typically, what could be your advice to the sales and marketing colleagues on how they should master this change and how HR function can enable in mastering change to the sales and marketing folks?
Okay. So I think, that's a good question. See, this change, it's not that change was not there earlier. Probably now we all have been talking in different seminars, VUCA world, etc. We have been talking these days only through slides, and this is real VUCA, I think. We never even imagined how would a real VUCA look like, but this is real VUCA. So it was not that change was earlier not there. This is how every industry has evolved. But what's more important is, as we kind of navigate through this change and, emerge somewhere in between going forward, because obviously this lockdown, etc., is not going to last forever. We'll come to some kind of a balanced state of affairs. I think the first important thing is to be open. I think for any leader or for anyone in the organization, there are certain way we have operated in the past, and it's a natural human tendency to replicate the behavior of the past to succeed in the future. However, when you undergo such kind of a rapid change management, I think we should be open to discard even what we have done yesterday. Because unless we experiment and do new things in a crisis or a change management, we cannot guarantee success for future. So I think the first is the openness. The flexibility with which we are learning and unlearning. I think many of us are victims of our past behaviors, habits. And in this kind of crisis, we always try to put those habits again in the current context. But we have to understand what this context is, and do what's the right for this kind of environment. The third is, I think, the willingness to experiment. Very often in a change scenario, we are not willing to experiment, but time and again, it has been proven that companies who have experimented, taken bold steps during a crisis, they have emerged stronger. Of course, there is a fear of failure, but I think, only when you have taken bold steps that you can fail, and nothing wrong in failing, at least you have kind of done something new or attempted doing something new. So I think my tips to leaders would be, or in marketing or sales or whichever function, that there is a certain model which has, operated in this country over the last 30, 40 years. Jain Saab said from when he began his career, we were not even in school maybe at that time. So sudden, changes where we are even seeing, a salesperson working from home. So we never thought a salesperson could work from home or, connect with a doctor sitting in home. These are not the stereotype models which the industry would have operated. For that matter, any other industry. So I think the openness, flexibility, quickly thinking on the feet, discarding what has worked yesterday and, embracing kind of these new techniques, new methods. And we never know, even 6 months down the line, some of these would be our day-to-day feature. I think these are very important for a leader to kind of inculcate and even pass it down the team. Because if the leader is not willing to kind of demonstrate these, traits or behaviors, the team will be also hesitant to kind of adopt this kind of newness. I think that's where I would come from. Coming to HR, I think HR's role is no different. They are enablers, they kind of partner, they coach the leaders, the business. I think at the end of the day, the HR role in this change management is also how do you create a great organization. And, through your policies, practices, like even in our function, sometimes, we keep holding on to policies and practices, which worked in the past. It could be a very simple attendance policy to a reward policy to a performance or an incentive. And we have to see in this kind of, current context, what's the relevant policy, practices, methods, working environment. For example, like many companies are even talking, work from home. I mean, obviously, everybody cannot work from home in the future, but somewhere we come to a midway. So we have to constantly enable the organization to think differently in all spheres, and that's how we will be change ready. In fact, I just read a quote, and I thought it would be apt to share in this forum, and I had kind of said this somewhere else. This is a quote by Andy Grove. Many of you may have read in the context of change management and crisis. He said, bad companies are destroyed by crisis because they don't see that opportunity. Good companies merely survive them, and great companies improve by crisis. So I think in a change management, we have to see how you become a good company by, constantly adopting the change and improving on it. This is an opportunity for all companies, and how each of these companies can really seize the opportunity, bring improvement, will actually differentiate the winners versus others. That's how I see, and I think all of us have role to play. It's not just the HR function, every function for that sake.
Yeah. So very important thoughts from a change management perspective. All of us have suddenly find ourselves in that situation, and if I can draw a parallel to at a personal level, suddenly our role in the house front has also changed for everybody, and I think everyone has beautifully adjusted to those requirements. Maybe perhaps we may not have adjusted or reoriented ourselves. So extending that thought, the most important thing is be open and accept that change, and therefore then you are ready to mend yourself to work around the skill sets or the environment and be ready to succeed in that environment of change. Sundar, coming to you with this background, is a lot of this would be driven by the sales training or the L&D organization's front end, and also a lot of collaboration with the marketing, HR, and the other functions. But especially for these sales training or L&D functions, what are your top suggestions to them so that they change, adapt, and they are recognized as a strategic business partner, something you mentioned in the while deliberating on the first question. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, on a lighter note, the first thing I'll say is don't use the word strategic, right?
Okay.
A good place to start is just say, let's keep it simple, right? First principles, how can you be a good business partner, right? Okay. Strategic or otherwise. And 2 or 3 simple tactical things, right? I think number one, recognize, or at least this is what I tell myself and my teams, it is a partnership, right? And if it's a partnership, I can't be doing all the heavy lifting myself. So I got to meet the business halfway. That's important. And therefore, the recognition and thoughtfulness about, while it's imperative for me to know as much as I can possibly about the business, it's also important for the business to make a deliberate effort to learn as much as they can about my processes. So we've got to meet halfway, and I think it's got to be clear. It's not me doing all the effort, trying to prove myself, trying to be a partner. If it's a partnership, it's two-way, and you've got to think and drive in that direction. That's number one. Number two, how do you build partnership? Very simple. How frequently are you checking in with the business, right? There's so much that's changing. This is a great opportunity to put your hands up and work on the adjacencies. So go beyond traditional, product training, selling skills training. There's so much we can do. CRM tools, adoption, building the hybrid rep. How should we be thinking rewards and recognition? I mean, there's a whole lot of narrative on what should your sales incentives framework look like, right? Given today and forward, right? These are all areas where I believe the commercial capability function has a role to play. So think on the adjacencies. I mean, don't get limited by job description or what we may have defined as this is my role. When you talk to the business, there are opportunities, you put your hand up, and then you don't have to sort of scramble and say, hey, am I your partner? Then you're behaving like a partner. I think that's one. Second, as many of the leaders before me said, really digital. I mean, the only thing I would say with digital is we as a function, we've got to keep our eyes and ears open. And that's going to further enable us to be better partners. What I mean specifically by that is you've got to have a sense of, what's happening in the consumer space. How are people consuming information? How are people consuming entertainment? How are people consuming education? Significant changes across all of these spectrums. What makes us think that all of that is not going to influence the way people experience organizations? So there's obviously going to be an experience spillover, as they call it in marketing, right? I mean, the same experience is spilling over. People are expecting the same brevity, right, that they're seeing on streaming platforms. So they're not comparing your e-learning with the e-learning they received in the previous organization. They're comparing your digital learning with what they're seeing on TED Talks and on LinkedIn Learning. So if our quality is not matching that, then you don't have the opportunity really to make a significant difference. So I think, again, rewire, stay invested, just keep eyes and ears open, which applies not just to learning, but all. And I think, the one thing that I try and look at and share with my team is, I mean, digital is not a spectator sport. It's not something that you understand intellectually or you can cognitively think. You got to be there, right? I mean, if you really want to understand micro messaging as the proxy for whether marketing, whatever, go spend some time on Twitter, see how brands are doing campaigns, right? If you want to understand video, the power of micro videos, spend some time on TikTok. I know there's this controversy around that right now, but go to the consumer platforms, pick out proxies. I mean, this is already happening, right? And my last recommendation, how can we improve our partnership? If there are colleagues in marketing on the call, my invitation to marketeers would be come and do pit stops in learning. It's a very interesting function. Unfortunately, we don't have many marketeers come and do short stints or pit stops in the learning function. We can benefit so much because, when a learning professional starts thinking like a marketeer, so much changes in terms of experience design, in terms of measurement, all of that. So my invitation to the broader commercial organization also would be, think of, if you have high potential talent in the marketing teams, why not consider a stint within learning? It'll be great for the partnership. It'll benefit both. They'll pick up some new skills. We as a function will improve. So there's so many things we can do at an organizational level to improve the quality of partnership. And when that happens, automatically you're going to be more strategic. But I wouldn't start by saying I want to be a strategic partner, because then you're overwhelming yourself. Just say, I want to be a better partner. What are the simple things I can do? And then, you do one, you do the other, one thing leads to the other.
Thanks. So I stand corrected from a strategic. First be a good partner, and then you can move on to the next level. And for that, simple mantra is a lot of stuff happening around you. Just look out, keep your eyes and ears open, and there's a lot to learn from things which are already happening. Go a few steps to your partner, and definitely partner will come to you. So I think those are the key messages. Srini, I think we have about 5 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes to take few questions. So from the pool of questions, if you can draw some of them.
Sure. So what I'll do is that prior to that, quickly, Vinay, I will show all the work done by the attendees and everyone and how it looks like. So what are the priorities that they have? Yeah, I don't know. You can see my screen.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. So I think the point was, that in terms of the brand building context, because since our next session was going to be devoted to that, I think one of the most important point which is standing out is digital media, and of course, how do we integrate efforts of field force and digital are, I think, clearly the most important areas which are coming up, as per the audience poll. Also, I think important point now, people are going beyond just digital. I think they have started thinking, and almost 55% response going towards saying, how do you evaluate and decide which digital mediums to use for my brand? So, so just craze for the digital probably is now becoming a little more mature, and people are saying, so what? I mean, everyone else could be doing XYZ, but do I need to do it that way? So what is relevant for my therapy, my brand? I think that point is coming out very clearly. And what are they doing in terms of looking at the whole brand planning process afresh? I think new insights and media spending are the two areas which are coming out again very clearly, that both of them, they're looking at it in terms of rewriting or relooking at the brand plans. And this is what probably we expected, but I think, and in more than 50% participants have taken up this poll. So, so that gives some credence to it. I think I was looking at the questions which had come earlier, as well as on the screen now what I see. And also I'm going to pick up some of the good concepts that, I think the panelists, they talked about. I'll request, maybe I'll begin with, Sundar. He talked about experience design role. And that was something, in a way, a new thing. and maybe that could be of interest to everyone. And then I'll come to maybe a few more questions to Sandeep, Rajeshri, and then Mr. Jain. So Sundar, can you just quickly talk about a little more about experience design role and what does it mean and how does it benefit the organization?
Sure. I think, well, there's a lot of it available in the in the public domain, so I'm sure people can look up. But in summary, what you really mean when you say you have a learning experience designer is they look at your entire content ecosystem and they treat every content as an asset. So you move away from thinking of you look at content assets that you may have and you run a taxonomy around that, and you know what skills you're building for, and then you actually, this learning designer can then strategically think of what content assets come in what point in the workflow. So essentially being able to map what the regular day in the life of, let's say, a marketer or a sales rep looks like. What are those moments where you can intervene? And at particular points in time, some content asset can come in. It could be a micro video, it could be a HTML file, it could be a quick checklist, whatever, depending on what you're trying to build out. And then you actually build that over a period of time, depending on the complexity of the skill, right? Because some skills you want to do awareness surface, some skills you want to go deep. So the journey decides it. So what the learning experience designer basically has expertise in figuring out what the workflow looks like for the individual, depending on the role, figuring out on the back end, what contents do we have that support this acquisition of knowledge or skill, depending on what you're trying to build, and also then is able to place it out in a journey, right? Without overwhelming the consumer, the learner, and making sure that in a period of time, you're able to build out the skill. This concept is also very popularly in HR and learning. It's called learning in the flow of work, which basically means you don't compartmentalize and say, I'm going to spend now 2 hours in training, because that piece is actually integrated into your flow of work. So it's a very different thinking and therefore requires a different skill set and capability. And many large global organizations have prioritized this at scale. Obviously, all this works when you have a good ecosystem in the back end. So it all sort of comes together.
Okay, thanks Sundar. Thanks for explaining. Coming to you, Sandeep, I think because what you mentioned and also I think what Mr. Jain mentioned in the beginning is about targeted marketing. And you talked about the KYC and the segmentation and then targeted marketing. I think they are a linked concept to each other kind of thing. So we have been, as an industry, we have been probably doing more at the demographic level in terms of when it comes to the customer profiling. Yeah, and I don't think we have gone really beyond that. Maybe a few organizations might have gone and they're probably trying to do it now. But so what do you think going forward, Sandeep, this KYC, how this is likely to evolve? What kind of more dimensions might come in the play, and then probably that will lead to new ways of segmentation and then targeted marketing coming out of that. So what do you think is going to be sort of future of this KYC?
So obviously some degree of crystal gazing is required, right? It's very difficult for anybody to predict, but at least a sense. So I'll give you a broad path, right? We're getting less time with the doctor. Slowly, what we'll realize is that the doctor's ability to connect and time to connect is going to be lower, and there's going to be a substantial investment which we are now getting into all this digital connect with the doctor, whether it be through the MedPrep, through social platform, through webinars that we do. And at some point of time, there is very rich knowledge and understanding that we need to have. So my sense, at least broadly, Shriyari, in this is this: you will see a lot of centralization of data that's going to come in. I mean, most companies are going to look at their SFE capabilities and say, we have done this till now, but I want to know my doctor. I want to know where I'm spending the money. I want to know where my last penny is going. I want to understand where the doctor is going. Where is the digital footprint that he's moving to? And at what point of time can I actually, as an organization or as the brand, start having conversations with the guy, right? What is he interested in? Knowing that, doctor time is going to be precious. I want to know more about the doctor so that at least the engagement is meaningful and it is not a one brush paints everything. So my sense is we will see a lot of centralization of data, a lot of centralization of doctor knowledge that's going to come in. The simple thing, Shiriri, about do I know how much money am I spending on a doctor? Do I know how many engagements am I doing with the doctor? Do I know what kind of interface is the doctor interested in? Does he open the WhatsApp, or is he a more emailer doctor? When I go and have an interface as far as the physical call is concerned, what is he interested in? Is he interested in having long conversations, or is he a more just a brand reminder kind of a doctor? I think those things till now, maybe, in a world where this was not such an essential commodity, was okay. We were able to, as Mr. Jain spoke about, we were able to do by mirroring V3, V4 kind of thing. But now that's going to be a very rare commodity. And I think how do we use that and have that conversation around and make it meaningful for both the HCP, both the brand as well as the MedRep is going to be an important part. I don't know whether I answer your question.
Yeah, no, I think directionally, what you mentioned is very correct, Sandeep. So one question I think, Rajesh, which I see, a number of times getting repeated on the screen is, the anxiety about, the employment part. So, so while, it is famously being said that, you can't guarantee employment, but employability is something, that one can be assured of. So, so maybe a last words, as a sort of, HR person. So, sort of how do we sort of, take care of anxiety of, a lot of people today in the sales and marketing and commercial areas. So what would be the piece of advice? I'm sure you have covered few points in your earlier comments, but I think, this is repeatedly this, I think I see a lot of questions around it.
Sure. No, I think this is a very fair anxiety. I think everybody, in not only in our industry, of course, which is far more, happening right now, there will be anxiety around jobs, security of jobs. So, and I won't, I can't say everything will be picture perfect. Of course, every organization will be under cost constraint. They will have to make sure they are productive, effective. There will be job losses in some place or the other. In some industry, it would be more. Maybe in our kind of industry, it may not be so much. But what's important, to come out of the anxiety is how, and you have answered yourself in the question, how do you make sure that you stay employable and relevant? I don't think, people, anybody, would lose their job if they are really adding value to the organization. So I think one has to understand every function, how they are contributing to the organization's success. And I think this is a time where each and every person should reinvent themselves, look for opportunity where, they can really upskill themselves, reskill themselves to stay relevant in their current job, current role, whatever they are doing, and be more, innovative, creative. I think if these things are there, I think one should not be so much worried about job. I think instead of worrying about job and those things, people should worry more about and focus on, building their muscle in terms of these areas. I think that would make them stay relevant, would be my advice. Stop worrying so much, take as it comes, but you invest in yourself, whether and whichever role or level you are in the organization, you have to invest in yourself to stay relevant. I think that's more important in today's context, in every industry. And together, then, we can make sure that the organization sustains.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think, we are exceeding time a little bit. So, Vinay, maybe I'll request you to give the closing remarks, and then maybe, maybe a few comments from Mr. Jain, or otherwise you can close, Vinay.
Okay. So first of all, a huge thank you, Jain sir, Sandeep, Ganguly sir, Sundar, for being with us and for a very enlightening discussion. As we discuss, it's extremely difficult at this point to put fingers on these are the skills, these are the knowledge areas, and to be precise, some level of crystal gazing would be required. But key important message for me as an individual is one is accept that change, that this has happened and this is going to stay. Anticipate what is required for me to be relevant in the new context. So keep your eyes, ears, and your antennas open to understand how this change is going to impact me. What are the new skills, new things I need to imbibe? What is the market demand, and therefore how can I reorient, reskill, or upskill myself? So I think that ownership on individual to understand these requirements is more relevant. There will be organization support available, but I think journey has to start with that individual. As we move ahead, the more precise insights, information on what are the more relevant skill sets and all would become more clear. But I think some time is required for that to flow in. Employability is something which is in my hand. I need to ensure that I am relevant in the current context. I think that's what are the key messages and takeaways for me. The only change today is that constant that is changing quite a bit, and it is going to change, and therefore accept it and take charge of your self-learning and development. There are plethora of things available to support you in the virtual world, through your colleagues, through your customers, through experts in the organization, but be ready to understand, accept, and take charge of your learning. So that's the message I think I would like to stay everyone with. I would also like to share that we'll be sharing a synopsis of this webinar, and this entire webinar will be available as a link on YouTube. So people, if you want to revisit, they have that opportunity. So that's going to be a follow-up support from our side. Once again, thank you very much for being with us, and thank you for a very enlightening evening for all of us. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Atul.
Thank you.